What's the good word, It's your boy DKB here. So, wanted to talk about our missing hole at wide receiver 3. Now, technically, it's not truly missing. We know we have Randall Cobb there, but as I kind of broke down before, statistically, as well as what we're seeing on film, he looks like one of the worst wide receivers in the NFL, which, big picture thinking shouldn't be too much of a surprise. The main reason he comes over, Aaron Rodgers is out. The offense changes under Zach Wilson, and you have a guy that Aaron Rodgers had to coax out of retirement to begin with to sign with the New York Jets as another piece to help install this offense. So there really isn't any motivation per se right now other than just a man that wants to win. But again, we're not seeing that translate to on-field success. So even though people would argue we need to upgrade from Allen Lazard as well, you can live with him, especially considering he's been our big play threat so far. But that is exactly the question here. Who actually replaces Mecole Hardman, right? Now, I do think in-house options are the way to go. You take a look at Xavier Gibson. Maybe you don't want to quite expand his role, though, so soon. He does have that sudden shiftiness as a receiver, but, right now, letting him still acclimate himself into the NFL, especially at his size, makes a ton of sense. Use him as you can on the end of rounds and stuff as we've seen, but just, keep him as your main returner, sprinkle him in as possible, as necessary, I should say. Jason Brownlee is the next big name that, of course, we are all looking at, right? You take a look at Jason Brownlee and what we've seen between the offseason, minicamp, training camp, and then, of course, what we got to see in the preseason games. Things didn't fully correlate, right? But from what we generally know, or I should say things didn't fully translate, but generally, here's the big ticket items when it comes to Jason Brown. We have a man that has a big body, huge catch radius. He's actually deceptively quick, and if you rely on what we've seen in training camp, he was doing a lot of his damage downfield, and I mean deep parts of the field to intermediate range, which it's not like he's running a 440 out here, but he has enough giddy up to go out there and make some things happen. And again, the body size that he has definitely helps out. Strong intermediate route ability. Again, we're seeing a huge amount of damage get done there, especially in the catches that we did see him make during the preseason. He's going to be a jump ball winner. Strong contested catch ability. That part didn't fully translate to the preseason games, but nonetheless, definitely something that we saw. But he's unproven, right? So even with him, maybe you want to give him the Tony Adams treatment. He's a guy that you feel like could eventually be a very strong starting option for you, but you want to let him continue to iron out some things without the pressure of needing to contribute at a high level, which is what he'd be asked to do, right? He'll immediately go from replacing Randall Cobb to people wanting to see him get snaps ahead of Allen Lazard at some point. So I'm sure the move happens at some point this season, but let him continue to marinate if we do see him get activated sooner. Perfect, which leads us to an external option. Now, I haven't been huge on this, but considering the trade compensation and stuff we'll get into, this would be a pretty solid option for the New York Jets. So the idea of Terrace Marshall from the Carolina Panthers has been floated out there, right? Former second-round pick from 2021, so a recently highly valued drafted wide receiver, 6'2", 200-pound body. He's bringing you a lot of intangibles that you love. The size, he's going to bring the speed element. Why would this be a guy that we want to consider strongly? When you took a look at that wide receiver 3 role, and Mecole Hardman, obviously he brought a speed element as well, but we also talked about him having an expanded route tree and all of those different things. You're kind of getting to hit the reset button with a younger guy in Terrace Marshall here, and kind of ask him to do the same thing. And at least with Terrace Marshall, the selling point here is that he is one of the best, and technically if you want to go back to 2022, the best deep threat option in the NFL, even in the limited usage that he's had. So let's kind of break him down a little bit, right? Take this into perspective. 2022 was his best year. Use best loosely, right? He racked up 490 yards in 2022. But again, 2022 is what made him stand out as the NFL's most dangerous deep threat. He did this while dealing with 4 different quarterbacks: Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, Jacob Eason. 2 of those names you guys probably wouldn't know. Between Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, you also wouldn't consider any of those guys to have elite arm strength and be consistent attackers and the deep threats of the field, especially with the offenses that they had at the time. Now, for what it's worth, the entire Carolina Panthers offense had troubles last season. DJ Moore, who we know to be an elite wide receiver one, he didn't even rack up 1,000 yards. Catch rates across the board were terrible. All of that stuff. But, again, career season for Terrace Marshall, right? You're talking about him having 17.5 yards per reception, which was good for second in the NFL. 10.4 yards per target, which made him good for third. And I found it interesting that, before the ball even got to him, he ran 12.5 yards before the catch was even made. So you're talking about a guy that he's not really running routes that's below the sticks, right? And this is a huge element that we need within our offense. It's something that's been frustrating for a lot of us to see when we are in those fourth down situations and we see that we're going for it, and Zach Wilson is having to settle for targets that are, a yard or two behind the line of scrimmage. And as he's mentioned, he's hoping his guy can make somebody miss, and then you have a lot of room to kind of run with, or at least you have a very easy conversion at that point. But realistically, you're going to want them routes, meeting the sticks, past the sticks, etc. So hopefully his brand of football helps kind of loosen things up as a whole for this wide receiver core. Only had 28 catches on the season, of course. Again, limited usage. I think he played about 76% of the snaps in 2022, but he was essentially just a deep threat, right? So you're going to have one or two options. You're getting the ball, they're hoping to take the top off, and we know in those situations you're either going to get the catch, make a huge play, or you're generally going to get a defensive pass interference. And keep in mind, there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you talk about trying to attack the deep field, right? The throw has to be, generally accurate, right? Give your wide receiver a chance to get to it. The wide receiver also has to have that chemistry, right? Be able to track the ball. Generally, you're making catches in front of your face mask, unless you're turning around, doing the whole Randy Moss type stuff, OBJ animations. But nonetheless, there's plenty of things that can cause problems, right? Especially if you want to talk about being the boundary and not being in between the numbers when you're making a catch. So it is pretty impressive the work that he was able to do. And then again, going back to the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, it's a wonder to see that he was able to be that productive. 24 of his 28 catches went for first down. So everything about this guy screams big playability, right? And that's really all we need, right? We don't need a wide receiver 3 that can rack up, almost 1,000 yards or anything like that for us. This is still going to be a run-oriented offense, most likely moving forward. But you're trying to replicate Mecole Hardman's skill set and hopefully have some better chemistry within the unit, and maybe just from the coaching staff's perspective, somebody that you're seeing, take the practice and be able to dominate in those situations, which, based on what we've heard and seen from other scenarios, I would say that's probably the case. Mecole Hardman didn't stand out in a realistic way during practices. We know his hands aren't the best, and so hopefully a guy like Terrace Marshall would be a guy that can come in, kind of change the narrative around a deep threat option for us. He did get phased out of the Panthers offense. We don't really know what all, that whole situation is about, but he is on the trade block. So, one of the last things to wrap it up, I mentioned him being the best. This isn't just me saying it and, taking a look at stuff. Per PFF, they graded him as the highest wide receiver on go routes, right? Get down the field, we're looking for touchdowns, or we're looking for 50-plus yards, etc., right? This is the guy that made it happen, and he did it above guys like A.J. Brown. And I forgot the other name that was highly rated up there. I'll have it on the screen somewhere. But nonetheless, this could be a very, very great cheap option for us, right? When we talked about tackles, I gave you guys Joe Haig as a very cheap option that should bring a solid skill set and consistency level for us. Terrace Marshall would essentially be my version of Joe Haig in the wide receiver group if we do want to go outside of the Jets building. What would it cost? Right now, it's looking like a conditional day 3 pick. that would have, the conditions would be based on productivity, reaching certain, yardage escalators, etc., which would be perfect for us, right? We might be able to ultimately get him for free if he doesn't necessarily pan out. If he does, you have a young guy that you think you can groom into this roster moving forward, giving not only Zach Wilson but Aaron Rodgers another weapon that's not completely different from what we've seen with Mecole Hardman. Kind of the best of a both worlds situation. But let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. I would jump on this in a heartbeat. Keep in mind, Joe Douglas has been able to rack up, some day 3 picks. So this is the kind of move that you would expect from a Joe Douglas from what we've seen before. High potential character traits, all of that good stuff, but maybe low productivity or a situation where there's a bad coaching staff, etc., that just hasn't worked out in their favor. So I'm all for it. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you again. Peace.